You can start now, Mr. Tennassee.
Okay. Welcome to Globespan. Tonight we have a very, very interesting subject matter to discuss, and we have three very eminent and knowledgeable guests. Tonight we'll be speaking about diaspora opportunities and remigration, taking into consideration that half of our population in Guyana or half of our population, Guyanese population, is living outside of Guyana and the other half in Guyana. It is very interesting that we will be discussing remigration. The question is, are Guyanese knocking on the door of Canada and the United States from here? Or are Guyanese in Canada and the United States, Britain, knocking on the doors of Guyana to get in? Should we support the remigration of people to Guyana? Or as Peeping Tom recently wrote in the Kaieteur News, he said, why you want Guyanese to remigrate? Let them stay where they are. They are sending millions of dollars of remittances to Guyana. You're going to lose all that money. Let us encourage people not to remigrate, but to migrate. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a very interesting discussion tonight. I will ask my guests to very briefly introduce each of themselves, each one of them, the way they would like to be introduced. And then I would call on Mr. Wayne Forde to begin the discussion about the remigration issue. So Wayne, introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Wayne Forde, and I'm the president of the United Guyanese Diaspora Global Network. My background spans about 20 years in corporate America in New York, working for 100 companies and business development.
Okay, Wayne has some problem there with his thing. So can we go to our next guest? Timothy, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Paul. You caught me by surprise. Most occasions, the moderator introduces us. Corporate lawyer, chairman of Unknown United Guyana. I'm not a member of the diaspora. I live, work, and have my roots right here in Guyana.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Our next guest is Mr. Peter Ramsaroop. Peter, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Peter Ramsaroop, the CEO of Guyana Office for Investment, and I'm very interested in this discussion. I think I fit both categories as a remigrant to Guyana, former diaspora. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, Wayne, Wayne, are you hearing, and are you, because just now you got a bit cut off when you were introducing yourself. Are you online?
I'm hearing you clearly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I'm hearing you. So Wayne, I'm going to start with you because we want to talk a bit about the diaspora and what is the new procedure. You've been following it. What is the new procedure now for remigration? The Secretary for International Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs International Cooperation, Robert Possad, just issued a brochure that explains and is supposed to simplify the way Guyanese can remigrate to Guyana with benefits. Are you aware of this? And do you know what are these new developments in terms of remigration?
Yes, I'm aware of it, and I have a copy of the document.
Wonderful.
And essentially, that document covers individuals returning to Guyana, but it is not very specific. But I want to go back at the beginning, or to the beginning. I'd like to ask you gentlemen, Peter, Paul, and Tim, right? Have you ever seen the Diaspora Engagement Strategy document that was developed in 2017 by the IOM and given to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be published to the diaspora and to be implemented?
Before we try to answer that, was it, from your knowledge, was it? Was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the previous government, did they make it available to the public? Yes or no?
No, it was not.
Okay, I'm going to make my first comment on that. I was at a conference on dynamics of Caribbean diaspora engagement at which you were at present, sponsored by the University of Ghana. Myself, I prepared a paper, I presented it on a diaspora strategy, policy strategy. Gail Teixeira, a senior cabinet member of the current government, she presented a paper there also. One of the points I made, and I made about 13 recommendations, and one of the points I made is that the IOM started this study bank, which is supposed to have the data of all Guyanese abroad with skills and knowledge and so forth, but we have never seen it. And we, at the time when we were at that conference, I think it was 2017, Harman spoke at that conference. And when I presented, there were 3 ministers present in the audience. They had a committee of 5 people and they were supposed to produce a policy, but we have never seen the policy. We do not have a diaspora policy as yet. What has come out, however, is a very practical thing. And that is that there is now this brochure on how you can remigrate. I was looking at it. And basically it's saying what people are interested in, one of the many things, is if they remigrate, what kind of benefits they will have in terms of taking back their assets to Guyana. Who makes that decision? Does the tax authority, GRA, makes that decision, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs makes that decision? Well, now the new government has reintegrated the diaspora issues into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They will make a recommendation to the GRA, and the GRA will say whether the Guyanese who is returning can have concessions. But as yet, and the government is only 100 days in there, but as yet, Wayne, and you are probably in touch with the government, and if I see anybody in the government while I'm there, I will ask them to read the documents which were put out at this conference. We don't have to remake the wheel all the time, man, and try and think of how we can come up with a diaspora policy. It would be useful, don't you think?
Absolutely. Well, let me just give you a little bit of information as to what's happened recently under the new administration. The IOM, in conjunction with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has created what they call an enhanced diaspora strategy document. And that document should have been rolled out in December of this year through a virtual meeting, virtual forum, but that has been canceled. So the administration has taken some steps. The Prime Minister, the President, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs have all committed to engage in the diaspora effectively. But engaging the diaspora effectively has to take into consideration what makes diaspora engagement successful and what are the pitfalls. So experts, migration experts, have identified about 3 areas in which can cause the diaspora strategy to fail. And one is lack of adequate funding. So if there isn't a budget for it, then there isn't much you can get done. India has, I think, about 3% allocated for their diaspora, and they have a ministry of Foreign Affairs dedicated to their diaspora. And the Indian diaspora, they send home about 82 billion. So they use a formula based on remittances to determine the allocation for the diaspora ministry, and it's somewhere around 3%. When we look at what we have in Guyana, we have to ask ourselves, how serious are we in engaging half of the Guyanese population on this globe with just a few people or department? So one of the interesting things is that in terms of the structure and mechanism, there are about 26 countries that have separate diaspora ministries, about another 17 that have sub-ministry level diaspora departments: Chile, Germany, Ghana, Netherlands, Mexico, Peru, Philippines. And so when you look at this, you ask yourself, are we following the best practices to engage the diaspora effectively. And I'll just close with this one question. What is the purpose of the remigration strategy? And I'll expand on that in what other countries have done in terms of remigration for the diaspora.
Okay.
So what's the strategy? Why do you want to engage the diaspora to return to Guyana?
Okay, before we go to Peter and Timothy, you mentioned remittances. First of all, for our audience, IOM means International Organization for Migration, which is an agency of the United Nations. So very often, University of Guyana on the policy strategy was that remittances from Guyana represents more than the foreign direct investments into Guyana. Guyanese abroad send remittances that amount to more than foreign direct investment. And secondly, it is at about the same amount that all donor countries put together gave Guyana in terms of development aid. So, my friend, these Guyanese abroad are doing extraordinary things. So now, Peter and Timothy, please jump in and react to what comments we have made so far on this subject.
Timothy?
Mr. Jonas, you're muted.
Us Guyanese, we're very practical people. And I'm afraid, forgive me for being critical, but I think so far we've probably let down the people who've been listening to this program. Because so far, one person has asked if other people have read a paper, and then the other person speaking has talked about acronyms and the need for a policy and the history of the development of the policy in Guyana. We putting cart before horse. We got people abroad, Guyanese abroad. Somebody said it might be a good idea for them to migrate back to Guyana. But let's talk about why. Well, let's talk about papers and who wrote this and who's developing a policy and if you need a budget. Do we want Guyanese in the diaspora to travel back to live in Guyana? Is it desirable? Will it be good for the economy? And if so, then what effort should we make to do it? And what kind of concessions should Peter Ed go invest to offer these Guyanese to come back? Bearing in mind that they will therefore be getting preferential treatment over us Guyanese who are already here in Guyana. Let's talk about that. Now for me, when you use the expression diaspora, you're wasting time already, because there's no single unit that represents the Guyana diaspora. Guyanese from all walks of life leave Guyana and go away. The reason they do it is because life is hard here. So most of them leave because they can't make ends meet. They're ordinary people, guards, teachers, tellers in banks, gardeners, cleaners. The work that they do here cannot make ends meet, and they go away and they do the same work and they can make ends meet, because the structure that exists abroad, including the safety net, welfare, dole, unemployment benefits, and the fact that the standard of living is better because the minimum wage gives you an affordable life, gives those same ordinary, well-intentioned, good people who cannot make it in Guyana an opportunity to make it abroad. You have the other level, the more educated level, who go away like you, Paul. They end up lecturing at universities. They end up starting small businesses, working as managers in the same bank. And then you have the few who get into commerce, get into a business, make money. Those categories have nothing to do with each other, and we throw them all together as diaspora. So we got to start identifying our terms and then deciding what is beneficial. You talk about remittances. Most remittances come from those ordinary people at the bottom who got poor family back home and got to send money back for their poor family back home. The wealthy folk like Peter don't have to send money back for his family in Guyana because this family in Guyana are already making a good living. So the remittances you're talking about are coming from the more ordinary folk because their family back home need it. We have to start defining terms, talking about and identifying where the needs are, and that is what informs your policy, rather than talking about a paper and the need to devise a policy. We're four brains here.
Talking about, all I'm saying is that we have had Guyanese have contributed to this debate on the diaspora, did research. But because of the way the world is organized, whenever it comes from the US or the IOM, then it becomes a big thing. Now, the second thing is that what we are saying is, you are talking about these remittances. We are aware of that. We're in New York. We're all over the place. We live with those people. We know how they live. They do 2-3 jobs to send money back home. The other thing is, people send money directly to the local communities in the area of education, in the area of health, even the area of security, in terms of making sure that their homes are safer so nobody can break into it. So in all the areas, this remittances is being used. And globally, remittances go from countries all over the world, whether you're in Ireland or whichever country you are, or India. And I'm very aware of what's going on in India. But the thing is that there is a new thinking, and this is where Go Invest probably could come into it. There's a new thinking that this remittances, instead of sending money to people, the money should be sent to them, with opportunities that they could use that money to self-sustain themselves. That so the relatives who are doing 2 or 3 jobs, to send them that money, that they could have opportunities to invest that money to become independent and to be able to job create on their own. So that is one idea, how to have micro enterprises with this money. This has been used in Bangladesh, India, and many other countries. So Peter, do you think that's possible, that these remittances can be transformed into some kind of opportunities of investment in Guyana at the micro level to make it more self-sustaining, and they don't have to depend for the rest of their lives on these remittances from abroad?
Well, Paul, I would rather, I'll get back to that question in a second, but I would like to emphasize Guyana has changed course. We are on a trajectory of significant growth. In 2020, we will grow by 26.2%. We're the fastest growing economy in the world in the next few years based on our population size. We are, our president has embarked on an aggressive economic agenda for Guyana. We have investment opportunities that surpass any other country in our region. What we have done with, and I agree with Tim on talking a lot about our local content. We are emphasizing local content. We're ensuring that the president said Guyanese in Guyana will be creating wealth. We'll be looking to ensure they have jobs. But as we look out at the trajectory of the next few years, we're going to need a significant involvement of skill sets to ensure that our country meet the demands that are needed. With that, the president and the Guyana government has opened up to the diaspora the opportunity to come back to our country and to contribute. So whatever incentives that we have opened up, it will be a lucrative opportunity to say, you know what, Guyana is about to develop. If you look at the oil industry, you look at our agriculture sector, we are going to be an aggressive place to be. The president says we're the #1 country in the region for investments. So I believe what our president has done to our Guyanese that have left our shores is to open back up. Guyana says, come back, we'll give you some incentives. We need your skill sets and your job opportunities is there. It's not to dictate or to emphasize that the diaspora is more important than our locals at all. We have some great people in our country. You know, Timothy is a good example of that. I've migrated to Guyana, and I believe that I've enjoyed my time back in our country. And so we are looking for people with passion. Guyana is going to be developing. You want to be part of it. You have the incentive to come back. We welcome you back to Guyana, and our president wants all of us to participate. So it is not about remittances anymore. It's about what the development stage. We have an infrastructure development. I just sat on the evaluation board for the hotel industry in Guyana. We put out an expression of interest. We have over 30 major hotel chains that wants to build a hotel in Guyana. The job creation of those, just if we build 5, will be significant. We have people in the diaspora that have hospitality experience. We need that level of commitment back to our country to see us grow. We need to build capacity among our staff, among our people. So I think this whole discussion got to get away from who left in the past, what does remittances do, and says Guyana is about to go into a new direction under the leadership of Dr. Irfan Ali. We're giving everybody that opportunity to be part of the development. We welcome you home. Let's get on with doing the business of growing Guyana. And to me, that's the discussion that I would like to see people listening happen. Yes.
If I may respond though to Tim and Peter. Paul, you mentioned remittances, just as an example. But if we understand what diaspora engagement truly is, based on best practices by 130 countries, we'll recognize that the diaspora contributes in about 7 different ways. Remittances is the most widely known one. But there's knowledge transfer, there's direct investment, there's capital markets, there's tourism, there's philanthropy, and there are other areas the diasporas invest in their country to increase capacity and build the nation. The reason that I mentioned where is the strategy document is because no business, no organization can succeed without a proper strategy. But just having a strategy and letting it lay on a table is not going to make it effective either. It has to be implemented. And that's where I started, that there isn't a proper strategy document that leads you into policy areas. So let's talk quickly about policy areas. Let's talk about what governments have been doing recently. Many governments and organizations have moved away from programs that call their diaspora to return home permanently. So when I asked about what is the intent of this remigration accomplish, Balkan countries, Bulgaria has the highest depopulation in the world. Croatia and a few others in southeastern Europe, they are now engaging their diaspora to assist in building capacity. And when it comes to policy, many countries have encouraged the circulation of highly skilled nationals to return. Turkey did that. The Netherlands did it. Thailand did it. Israel did it. So when we start to dig deeper into the diaspora engagement process and we get into policies, then we recognize that let's look at what other countries have done. And I'll close with this part here. When we talk about how we can use remittances, Paul, yeah, that falls under capital market investments. And some, big word, securitization of future remittances to provide mortgages for the locals. So getting away from just remittances transfer is good. But when we start talking about policy areas and start to look at what other countries have done, that's when we can develop an effective diaspora engagement strategy. And that leads us right back to the question as to why are we asking Guyanese to return home? And remember, if you look at the document, it only talks about individuals. It does not talk about the business sector. And the business sector, according to Act 2004, is supposed to be the engine of growth in Guyana. According to an IDB report 2018, 23% of small businesses in Guyana failed. 70% of them failed between 2013 and 2018. Why they failed? Lack of access to finance, expansion in markets, and different other reasons. The diaspora can play a role in helping businesses to understand how it is that you can improve your business, sustain your business, become more competitive. Right now, Harvard is working with the University of Guyana, and they're engaged in a program, GDI, Guyana Development Initiative, where they will be working on building a national competitiveness strategy for Guyana and a value proposition for Guyana. You see, when you start to look at these things, you start to look at Singapore, where many folks have compared Guyana to Singapore and said, why have we had divergent trajectories? Well, look at what Singapore has done in its business sector. Look at what it has done to the diaspora. Look at what China has done. So this is deep, it's broad. This is a field of study that could take years. There's tons of literature on diaspora engagement that we don't have time to get into right now.
Is there a reaction from Peter and Jonas to the comments by our friend?
It's important to learn from others, but it's also important to have a sound understanding of your own society, your own system, and its peculiar needs. To try to draw a comparison between us and Croatia or Thailand or Turkey, and to discuss the value of the diaspora in those countries vis-a-vis the value of the diaspora in Guyana, is to go down a slippery slope. I'll tell you why. When you talk about knowledge transfer, which is one of the items that you raise as benefiting, that in a way we can benefit from the diaspora. Knowledge transfer, if you look at how it has worked in Guyana, has been most effective from foreign entities, joint venture entities that have come in to invest rather than from the diaspora. And this is the unusual circumstance of Guyana that makes us so different from those other countries that you talk about. First of all, we speak English. So almost any foreign investor from anywhere, Canada, States, England, most Frenchmen speak English, most of the Europeans speak English, almost anywhere in the world, India, most African countries, they can come here to invest without that language barrier that the same investor would have if he tries to go to Croatia or Turkey or Thailand. So that we have a much wider spectrum from which we can draw human resources of knowledge. And we've seen it work in Guyana. The second thing is that small businesses have a hard time starting up in Guyana. Most small businesses need their market nearby. Because Guyana's population is so small, you will find that it doesn't make sense to start a small business and to bring somebody from foreign to start a small business here. Because the best business and the easiest way to start up is for export, because the export market is the larger market. That is why we do timber, mining, agriculture for export. The other thing is that to start up a business in Guyana is actually difficult. It's notorious that the bureaucracy, the red tape for banking, that kind of thing, is difficult for a small person. And therefore you will not find it very easy or very common that somebody from abroad comes to start from scratch a small business. What you will find, and when you look around Guyana, you will see it. In Pomeroon, a large company is getting into coconuts. In Northwest, a large company has just found a new resource of gold. It's the large companies that are coming in. Peter is talking about the investors that are coming in, the hotel chains. These are large companies that are able to withstand the difficulties of investing, able to withstand the bureaucracy, get through that in the expectation that they will be making money over a long term. And that's a luxury that small investors don't have. Small investors need an easy opportunity, an easy turnover, and I'm afraid things are hard in the commercial world in Guyana. It's not going to be that easy. So we have to understand the needs in Guyana rather than we have to learn from others, but I don't think we should just draw automatic comparisons. I think we have to be very careful to understand what our needs are and what it is that the diaspora offer to Guyana. All diaspora is very important. We get a lot from them, but to automatically talk about knowledge transfer, direct investment, you got to look for specific examples and see what proportion has been successful, what proportion has been unsuccessful in Guyana, not worldwide. And I think you'd be surprised at the result, which is why I kind of agree with Paul that your starting point must be the remittances and understanding what portion, what demographic of the diaspora provides the largest chunk of that benefit. And then ask whether that same proportion, the ordinary, honest, hardworking, two jobs people, whether they are doing better by helping their family directly, as Paul discussed, or if we want to try to encourage something else from them, when we really don't have evidence that it may have worked.
Yeah, and Tim, you're right to point. Here's what has to happen in terms of evidence-based decision making. Okay, first, there ought to be a skills gap assessment in Guyana to determine what the needs are. The World Bank 2013 identified Guyana as having an inadequately educated labor force that impedes economic growth. So you're right. Let's get that done. Let's look at that. Let's do a diaspora mapping to identify the skills and the expertise of the Guyanese and their interest level so that you can match them to. And that's what other countries have done. And that's part of your strategy. That's the first part of the strategy that I mentioned. And it has several layers. So you're right, that has to be done. But if you don't have a strategy, you're not going to do it. And you're not going to address the problems that Guyana needs. And secondly, we agree that there's no one size fits all. My reference to the Balkan countries, Southeastern Europe, is because they have a tremendous brain drain similar to that of Guyana. So I just use that as an example. And their diaspora policy is to attract brain recirculation, they call it, or brain gain. And it comes back to my question, what is the purpose of the remigration strategy? Is it to address the brain drain problem, or is it to address depopulation, just have more Guyanese living in Guyana? So this is very deep. It will take a long time to go through each concept and each aspect of it.
Well, you're in a seat of where you could do some things. Here what the problem is here. We have the largest foreign direct investment is from Guyanese abroad. We are the second poorest country. I know oil is coming and we're going to get 500%. But I've studied a lot of countries. We have what you call jobless growth, and we have growth without development. A country could have 2,000% growth, and it does not transform the society. It does not get to the poor people. Now, there's something real here. Poor people who left Guyana and are still poor abroad are doing 2 and 3 jobs to help poor people in Guyana. Now, what I'm saying here, the challenge we have there is that we have to let these remittances be transformed into some form of investment that can help give them self-sustaining livelihood. Now you are in Go Invest. So what I would like to know, there are some very practical things, starting a business. So if a diaspora person would like to help their relatives in the grassroots to start a little business, how easy is it now, or how easy will you guys make it? One, for them to have a bank account, and simple things, getting permits, dealing with the corruption problem, and this kind of things. How do customs and so forth? What have you got this in focus, these practical items that are non-tariff barriers to the development of business and development of a country? That's what I'm interested in. How can we transform these remittances that is until now is the largest foreign direct investment? It goes directly to the grassroots to help these people with self-sustaining livelihoods. How can you help them with Go Invest to help these people?
Paul, I gotta say, I have to advise that, you have to study where Guyana is today and what our trajectory going forward. We appreciate over the decades the remittances that have helped our country survive, as you said, largest contribution to the GDP. As we look at the agenda of the next year to 5 years, we have embarked on an aggressive economic agenda that will change the thinking of what you said has been the past. Definitely, when the president talks about a remigration policy, he is opening up it not just to a remigration. I think Wayne talks it from an individual perspective, but really it's to tell you about the opportunities that exist. Timothy talks about the foreign direct investors coming in. I've met with from the Mexicans to the British to the Americans to the Chinese to the Indians. They are coming in saying, we are going to meet the demands and this gap analysis to help us develop the next phase. What we would like to see, and reason why you've seen the foreign ministry put emphasis on the diaspora. We would like to see those opportunities be offered also to our local entities, which we have, and we do not discriminate any incentives to our locals. We would like to see the diaspora businesses get a chance to compete and come in to do some of that work. We would rather see that if it's all possible. So as we go forward, the bureaucracy, yes, the president talks about a single window opportunity. The banks of Ghana is starting to change the regulations on opening the bank accounts.
Very good.
We are streamlining the concessions that is required for investors to enjoy a friendlier environment. So we don't want to see Guyanese in the diaspora feel that they are left behind. And I believe we cannot be stuck of the 1980s. I think a lot of us are stuck in why my parents left Guyana and why Guyana where it was. You've got to look at our current working, young, aggressive president that set the agenda. If we buy into that agenda and we get part of that agenda, we will have an exciting ride over the next 5 years. The opportunities that abound in our nation is tremendous. Don't let's get stuck on a policy and get stuck on what has been done in the past. Let's look at the opportunities today and get involved. Be part of it. You will benefit from this growth. Wealth in Guyana is happening. And we want to make sure all Guyanese across the world get a chance to benefit from the wealth. President talks about 50,000 jobs. That is no small feat. It is starting to happen. Today I met with a telecommunication company that wants to open a very large call center back in Guyana. We see that growth is happening. So let the Guyanese around the world come and be part of that. That's what we are saying. And it is the bureaucracy is being cut, and the president is making Guyana a friendly investment environment. And that's why you see that rush of 100 American companies knocking on the door to come in. It is real. So don't let's get left behind by discussion on what was in the past. We know what happened in the last 5 years. Guyana was stagnant. No development, no investment in the last 5 years. Let's ensure that doesn't happen in the next 5 years. And that's what our president is calling for. Let's get on with doing the business of our country.
If I may, let's go back to the remigration policy, the remigration strategy. What part of that incentivizes any diaspora investor to come back to Guyana? That's a major question. So when we look at the strategy document and we look at policy areas, we'll ask ourselves, if I'm an investor and I wanted to invest in Guyana, what's my rate of return? What's my expected rate of return? And why should I come to Guyana? So here's what other countries have done. Israel had, for their returning citizens, they were eligible for 2 types of loans to open a business. Ecuador had matching funds for starting a business. In 2018, they funded about 4,329 entrepreneurs. Colombia had a foreign trade bank that offered lines of credit to diaspora entrepreneurs. So none of these things might fit Guyana, but let's look at what other countries have done and say, well, they did that to attract investment from their diaspora. They gave them incentives. Jamaica, coming closer to home, when they wanted folks to return, they paid for those highly skilled folks to return to Jamaica in the 90s. The program is defunct now, but that's what they did. They gave them a lot of tax incentives and paid a one-way trip for them and their families to come home. Other countries have done the same. We're not saying to him, Guyana has to do that, but let's look at it.
Let me shift it to another level, because you're making some good comparisons, and we're in a globalized world. And therefore, in as much as the experience locally is very important, the experience globally is also important. So it's local, global, global, local. I did a lot of work with a group here on India, and we brought a minister of technology, and we had a big meeting with about 45 Indians. As a matter of fact, I got invited to speak to the Indians in Virginia. When I came out, I had 100 business cards. All these Indians had an IT company on the Virginia corridor. When we went around the room, the men and women were between the ages about 35 and 50. And each one of them, when they introduced themselves, they had a business in America and a business in India. So that's another model, away from just talking of remittances, that Guyanese abroad, I think it's a good idea that they have a business there and they have a business here. It's a good idea because in that way, they are able to do things. Because what I would not like to see is that we are depending totally on the government. Governments do not develop a country. It's people that develop the country. So the question is, and we have to develop a very powerful and strong private sector, but we cannot leave small business out. These remittances that we refer to are going to small people and the grassroots people. So what we need is small businesses and opportunities for them. It's good and behold, oil is coming, and Nigeria has a lot of oil. Venezuela had a lot of oil. I have 90 countries that have a lot of oil. I go to those countries and the people live in poverty. So the question is, we have to think above and below. We have to think horizontally. The other thing is that a lot of people are not aware of this. They speak of the Silicon Valley and the revolution there. It's a lot of Indians, knowledgeable Indians who were trained as engineers and business people that went to that Silicon Valley and helped effect that revolution. But you know what they did? They told Microsoft, I could go back to India and I could do this job at a cheaper rate. And now you had a brain gain. The Indians went back to India and they are running a lot of the businesses for all these large corporations. So I am not saying that when I mentioned the point of remittances, the point is that I said it's a foreign direct investment, but it's not an investment that is creating self-sustainable employment for the people that it is going to. And this has to be looked at. And I think that small business, Go Invest is looking, from the sense I got from Peter, it's more external. Right, Peter? You are looking more at foreign investors rather than the local situation. That would be for the Small Business Bureau in Guyana or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think we'll clarify that we have a lot of local businesses that are expanding radically in our country. They're competing against some of the large companies that are coming in. So on the major investment side, I think we have a good trajectory going forward on our local investments. On the small business side, and in the remittance, and you're talking about the smaller business, yes, there are many opportunities. Ghana is built on a lot of small businesses, and small businesses are the driving factor in any economy. And so we find that the combination of the small businesses, the foreign direct investment, and what we call the local content initiatives investment are coming together to fill the gaps needed in our economy.
If I can react to respond to
something, because Timothy, you have any response to Peter, because you're there in Guyana on the ground?
We still talking in vague, obtuse, obscure language about these wonderful opportunities and this, that, and the other. And Paul, you're talking about giving people opportunities, for small business and that kind of thing, again, in vague language. In fact, it sounds as if you've not run a business in Guyana. So I want to give it some context. The largest employer in Guyana is the government. I want to say it again. The largest employer in Guyana is the government. We're not like England, where the largest employment comes from small businesses and bottom houses. We're not like the States, where the largest employment comes from those same little two-man businesses where you got 5 employees and 6 employees. So don't let's pretend that there's anything like wonderful opportunities and all of that unless we define them. Let's get down to specifics as to what exists in Guyana. And let's go back to Guyanese history. When our economy was rock bottom, what began to pull it out was the foreign investment. Oh my, under President Hoyt, employed 1,200 people. Barama in 1991 under President Hoyt employed 900 and then 1,000 people. Other companies like that came in, foreign investors came in, and by providing employment for 900 people, 1,000 people, things began to turn around as more people stopped their dependency on the government or on Gaisuku and went into the private sector. But it's large investors that were able to do that. The same thing exists now. It is the large investors that are coming in and that Peter is encouraging that will solve our problem. Because when you go to your semi-literate cane cutter or farmer in Mahaika or in Berbice and you tell him about wonderful opportunities, you're lying to him because his life hasn't changed and his life will not change by gas and oil. And when we close down Gaisuku and Gaisuku remains half closed and half broken, the unemployment that results from that got to find space somewhere else. And the hope for that space will be the construction sector and the other raw labor sectors in agriculture and mining that can absorb that. But where does that employment come from? Large foreign investment. Please don't let's talk about the plant and chips economy that the visionless Granger used to talk about, because that's not going to do it for us. That's a failure.
Let me just say,
large.
I think that we have to
start us, to kickstart us, and to get us going.
When Devin, are you ready for the break?
Yes.
Well, you could go on your break, Devin, and you let us know when we could come back to continue this discussion.
Logistics International, based in Trinidad, with representatives in Guyana, is pleased to announce its shipping services from Trinidad to Guyana. Logistics provides shipping services and has experienced personnel to handle all of your shipping needs from Trinidad to Guyana. Buy in Trinidad and let Logistics handle all of your shipping to Guyana, from small boxes to container sizes. Call Logistics in Trinidad at 1-868-336-8218 to handle all of your shipping needs, and they handle all sizes. Logistics International has been shipping for over 22 years to many Caribbean countries with reliability and dependability. Call 1-868-336-8218 in Trinidad. That's 1-868-336-8218. Or email at liclcargo@gmail.com. Travelspan is pleased to announce that the airport in Guyana is now open. There are flights from New York and Miami non-stop to Guyana. Call Travelspan for all your travel needs to Guyana or for your vacation to Mexico or Punta Cana. Call 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. Flights are now on sale to Guyana, and vacation packages are now on sale to Mexico and Punta Cana. Call 718-845-0437.
Okay, so we're back, and it seems to me, Wayne, that Timothy is going to be back. He took a break, and the other gentleman has had a sudden call and he had to leave. So, Wayne, continue. Let's move away from the policy and the practical aspects. How is it that I am more interested in the grassroots people, you know. Oh, you're back. Timothy, Peter had to leave for some reason. He said he has to go to he got a call. So let's see if we could put this discussion at another level. Now, most of the countries that want to have investments, they usually talk about whether their country is good for business. It seems from what we have read in the last 2 months that you have the American ambassador, Peter, the president, and other people in Guyana saying that lots and lots of big investors are coming to Guyana. They're interested. So what are they really interested in terms of investment, like hotels? Where are they going to get the tourists from for all these hotels, for example? I'm very curious. And in the middle of COVID now, what is the time frame we are talking about? You know, that's one. Two, the oil industry is going to be an industry that is going to give us an income. What we are hoping is that they will develop the local content. And local content is basically how you could get a spin-off from the oil industry. You know, I used to do a job as a trade consultant for Point Lisa's industrial estate in Trinidad, and I was a trade consultant. I went to various states in Venezuela. I give you one example: Ciudad Bolivar. They have iron ore, and they have the smelter. They have bauxite. They have the smelter, and they have the Guri Dam. Now, from those big industries came off small industries, downstream industries. I went to those factories, like, for example, one produce valves. I study what they do, what they produce, how much they have to sell, what is ISO that they're using, and so forth. Then I go back to Trinidad and speak to all the chambers of commerce and tell them, half an hour from here, I could take you there and do business, supermarket with supermarket, valves with valves, and so forth. But what the Trinidadian businessman was interested in, he says, Paul, how are we going to remove the non-tariff barriers? The National Guard are corrupt. And they named a list of other items that they have problems with doing business. So what I want to know that in Guyana, the big companies are coming, yes, and they apparently go directly to the highest leadership of the country, and they could get things done and get barriers removed. But how does the medium and the other size businesses trying to enter Guyana, how are they going to eliminate those non-tariff barriers? I'm sorry that Peter left because he would have been the best person to speak about this. But Timothy, you are in Guyana as a lawyer. You have your own little business, and you are aware. You probably deal with a lot of business people. Are we still in a position where there are still a lot of barriers for local business, small business, medium-sized business, not the big corporations? They seem to not to have a problem as yet.
Well, I think you're determined to go about this in a way that Peter and I were trying to move you away from. You're still trying to talk about small and medium business. Let me explain what I have in mind.
Okay.
When you talk about a hotel and then you talk about tourism, you're already showing a misconception. If you go and you stay in an Armada or in a one of those hotels, it's not tourists you see there. It's businessmen. It is people who are traveling in the course of business for meetings, for that kind of thing. And when you look at the hotels, the few hotels we have in Guyana, for the most part, they are doing well. They're often full because the number of businesses, investors, businessmen who are coming in to look around, to ask questions, to set up shop, keeping them operating. And that is going to grow because the investors will come.
You believe it's self-sustaining, it will grow?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So
that's a good observation.
You asked a question about the difficulty of doing business. Let's talk about some real terms.
Oh.
Guyana is hard. The reason the people in the diaspora left is because Guyana is hard. Crime is serious. So if you have the good luck to be successful, you got to build a high fence around your house. You got to put barbed wire at the top because somebody will be coming over your fence to steal from you. The roads are not good. Electricity is expensive. It is not easy to do business in Guyana. If you need help from the police, go elsewhere because when you call the police station, nobody coming to help you. The police are not there to help you. The police are there, especially if you're looking like your skin a little soft, like you come from foreign, they are looking for a bribe. Things are hard in Guyana. And at this stage, to talk about people coming here to start small businesses, you're wasting time and you're giving bad advice. The large investors have the size to withstand that. And as they start to come in and they start to provide employment, because we are so small, all we need is 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 new jobs, and it will change the dynamic entirely. And that is easily done. And when the same people that are now stealing from you because things are hard and they have no jobs, when they are employed, they can send their children to school. They're no longer stealing. The society can become more safe. The revenue the government earns can fix the roads, improve our police service, improve our teachers. And at that stage, we can then start thinking about, well, how else can we change things?
So we're talking about time frame, let's say between 5 to 10 to 20 years. Is that it?
More than that. Well, no, that's a time frame, yes. But I want to go further. You see, because our population is so small, we do not have a market here that is meaningful for anybody who wants to set up a business. We now have, what business you want to set up, Paul? You want to sell clothes? Because if you want to import clothes here into Guyana, you have to remember that if you're selling ladies' clothes, let's be specific, because these large academic ideas do not make sense in business. If you're selling ladies' clothes, you got to remember that the society is so small that most of those ladies who can afford to come and buy from you will be seeing each other at the social event. They don't want to buy the same dress. So you can't buy 100 of the same dresses and put it on a rack like they do at JCPenney or TK Maxx. You can't do that. Your business structure has to be different. You have to deal with corrupt customs to bring your stuff in. You can't keep the stuff for long because it starts looking familiar to the people because the society is so small. It is difficult. And now, in modern times, people could go on the same computer that I'm talking to you on and buy the same dress cheaper from abroad and from a company that is selling selling lots, so can sell cheaper than the local business who is selling 1 or 2 dresses a day and therefore has to have a higher markup. Things are not easy where you have a small market locally.
Saying that the future of Guyana over the next, let's say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years is totally in the hands of big corporations coming into Guyana, big investors.
No, how do you sell that?
All Guyanese could depend on is an employment, a job.
All right. Now here's what you're trying to sell. Here's what you're trying to sell, and here's why it's not working.
Yeah.
When a foreigner comes here to look around, the first thing he does is he jumps in a taxi. Then he goes to the restaurant. Then he goes to the hotel. Then he has to have a guide to carry him around and show him where is what, because we don't have road signs. Each of those stops that he's making for his taxi, for his food, for his guide, he is providing employment to someone in Guyana. So when you say that it's entirely in their hands, it's not. It's entirely in our hands, because that is a huge impact. The reason our economy is growing by 25%, the reason our economy is growing that much is because we're so small in the first place. So it's not all doom and gloom. It is a bright future, but we have to be realistic about where the bright future is and how to direct it.
Paul, let me just address this one thing about multinational corporations that Tim is referring to. And he's indicated these multinational corporations will do more in transferring knowledge to the Guyanese than the diaspora. The question for
I'm
Tim
sorry, I didn't say that.
Well, okay, then correct me. The question for Tim here is, what evidence is there to show that multinational corporations have built small developing countries, and name them if you will? And let me just give you the other side of that. When India wanted to develop its technology and to become the leader in technology in the world, it called on its diasporans. China, when it wanted to improve its manufacturing and become the leading manufacturer in the world, called on its diasporans. In the 90s, they went about getting 1,000 PhDs in science from the diaspora to help build their manufacturing. So the evidence shows that the diasporans have done more to build countries than multinational corporations. And then look right there in Guyana, and we'll ask yourself about one of the most powerful, the biggest companies in the world with a great market cap, Exxon. How many people has Exxon employed, and how has it changed the landscape in Guyana? So if you're going to use that as yardstick, then we might have a little problem with your theory there.
All right, well, let me answer your question, because I get the impression you haven't been to Guyana for a little while to get your feet dirty in our mud. When you try to draw a comparison with China, and you talk about 10,000 PhDs. Come on, you want to draw that comparison with Guyana? But to answer your question, our industries have been brought down so low by poor economic management of the two large parties over the 40 years that I'll use your same example with ExxonMobil. The safety standards that the local companies had to learn from ExxonMobil before ExxonMobil would even contract with them, because ExxonMobil is so afraid of negligence lawsuits by personal injury claims and that kind of thing, necessitated that the local companies improve their safety standards, their employment standards. I'll give you examples. Tulsi Prasad and some of the other timber cutting industries, when you go in the bush and you see, those boys are using chainsaws, cutting trees, wearing flip-flops. Now, that is inconceivable for these boys who come from foreign, where they have all their safety regulations. But before they would even contract with us, and as they themselves started up business, you saw men wearing safety helmets, hard tip boots, and using safety gear. And before Exxon would contract with the wharf owners, with the shippers, with the onshore folk, they were insisting on minimum safety requirements that were unheard of in Guyanese industry before then. You hear about mining and cave-ins, and you hear about pork knockers using a jet spray loosely, having a cave-in and dying. In the mining industry, the foreign mining companies that are coming are implementing safety standards that are better than what we know about. So there is knowledge transfer there already. As they start joint ventures with existing companies here, there is knowledge transfer as we learn their record-keeping systems. We learn their safety systems. We learn their employee relations systems. So there is knowledge transfer. And where you are not understanding Guyana is that the economy was so destroyed by APNU and PPP over the years that we were at rock bottom and could only learn, and have learned a lot from the foreign investors that came. I'm not saying they're wonderful people. They're not. They're hard-nosed, selfish, money-hungry businessmen. But
you didn't answer the question. The question is how many Guyanese have they employed as one of the biggest companies in the world?
OMI employed 1,200.
Not OMI, Exxon.
Barama employed 1,000. If you're asking how much Exxon is employing, they're not here to employ people. They have an oil rig that's miles offshore that none of us will ever see. That's not their function here. Their function is to provide royalties so that we can use that free money to help our infrastructure, encourage construction, encourage agriculture, and provide employment there. But don't ask how much people Exxon employing, because that's ridiculous. That's like asking if Kane Carter from Borbies can go and do engineering on an Exxon rig. You're being unrealistic.
No, Tim, you've got to understand this. In this real world that we live in, information is key, and data-driven decisions run the world, not the Trumpian kind of non-scientific approach. And it's apparent that you're kind of saying we don't need that sort of data. Yes, we do. We have to understand the social impact and the positive social change that any company is bringing to Guyana, including Exxon. And if you don't, not you, if that information doesn't exist, then we need to get that sort of data. Because believe me, Exxon knows how many Guyanese it is employed. Ask them.
You seem to have an attitude against research and data. What's your problem? Do you only work with anecdotes when you make analysis? Don't you need hard data? For example, he has asked a good question. I put 100 students to answer one question. How have the citizens from country X benefited from the oil revenues? I have all the papers here. There is no country in the developing world where they had oil that the society was transformed. Oh yes, they have big buildings. Oh yes, they have a lot of hotels. Oh yes, they have a lot of things like that. But the poor people, they live for less than $2 a day. You know where they are now? They're trying to kill themselves, getting to Europe, dying to cross the ocean to get to Europe. So what, Timothy, I think you need to address is not only to speak of the role of what benefits the big companies will bring, but how Guyanese inside Guyana can access resources and deal with some of the issues you raised. You raised the issue of security police. You raised the issue of corruption with the customs and so forth. and the infrastructure, how we can think through those and what role the government will play, what role the diaspora will play, what role the private sector can play. There I see there are opportunities. There is where there may be opportunities. The other one is the local content. The emphasis is on local content. Every country is speaking about it. How, wherever there's oil and gas, how can you get spin-offs? How can you integrate it in the economy? So, Timothy, my question to you is, you're very knowledgeable of Guyana. Do you really have a problem with data and with research in order to make policy? Because that's a point that that my friend Wayne is raising with you.
That's a non-question, Paul, and you know it. Anybody would be a fool to say that they have no regard for data and information. But we are three brains here in a forum having a discussion in front of people. And what we are saying is there needs to be a policy. Well, we should have stayed home if we come to talk about their need for a policy. What we should be talking about is what our idea of the policy should be.
I agree.
So far, I have heard one gentleman say we need funding. Well, I'm sorry, if that is the grand nature of your contribution, again, you should have stayed home. We have to talk about the deal.
Why are you leaving out?
Let me finish, Paul. Let me finish, please, Paul.
The foreign.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
We have to talk about real situations, real arrangements in a real country. We can't draw loose academic parallels that may or may not pertain to what we have here. You talk about Africa, I assume you're talking about Sierra Leone, Nigeria.
Nigeria, I'm talking about Angola, all these other countries.
Right, where there is oil, but the corruption is such that the society hasn't been helped from it. Now, everybody knows that. It's a waste of breath to raise those issues without drawing a comparison to say this is how they got like that and this is why Guyana is not going to get like that. But you haven't tried to do that. You haven't tried to bridge it. So what I'm asking you is what is your policy?
To how, beyond the big companies, Guyana can also be developed with an input from the Guyanese from below.
Good.
That is
so
what
please give a specific example of how that has happened successfully or how you think it can happen successfully.
Well, you said that Guyana, we could succeed if we follow, if we address it, if we effectively deal with it.
That sounds very nice. But again, I'm asking for a specific example.
Emphasize the role of the foreign corporations. I think we're missing out on a role of Guyanese themselves.
Oh, Paul, one example. One specific example where it's happened successfully that you're pointing at, please.
Where?
In Guyana, you're talking about what's needed, and I'm asking you for an example or a suggestion as to a specific industry where it will work.
That is something that has to be done. That is something to which we have to address our minds. Because we're the second.
So you have no example?
How can I have an example? The only example we have is the remittances going to the poor people.
Well, then it would appear.
Beyond that, we don't have how we are going to come up with ideas on how we don't depend totally on the oil companies and on the big corporations.
Statistically speaking, just using figures, from the fact that you can't find a single success example, that maybe there's something wrong with the approach and it needs to be re-examined.
What? A success example of what? Of a small business in Guyana?
No. Of a new business starting up from a remigrant who has come, started from scratch and succeeded.
No, I wasn't linking it to remigrants. I'm speaking of the Guyanese at home.
That's diaspora. We're talking about diaspora.
Yeah, the other side of this thing, and we didn't get a chance to discuss that, in as much as we are talking about bringing Guyanese, trying to attract Guyanese from abroad.
That's what we're talking about.
How do you keep the Guyanese who are there to stay and to transform the society?
Well, still having started off from a statistic of 0, you've now changed the subject.
No, I'm not.
I'm glad you asked that question, because that question to me is important.
Yeah, that is the other side of the coin. When I began, I said that this guy in the newspaper said you should encourage Guyanese to leave because they send remittances home. Now, the point I want to make is, how can we get the Guyanese to stay at home? And one of the ways to get them to stay at home is if opportunities can be opened for them. And this is the point I'm trying to make. How can we catch that?
You have done exactly the same thing. You have criticized a point of view, saying this man is talking about Guyanese being more useful abroad. And then you have expressed a policy of making Guyanese stay in Guyana. But you haven't justified your policy or justified your criticism of his policy.
No, I
So-
didn't criticize him. I just was mentioning that he said that. I was highlighting something. I wasn't making a case.
So
but-
what is your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that you have to create incentives for people inside Guyana, and I know I think small business is very important, and I think they need bank loans, they need credit, they need training, they need a lot of opportunities.
You've heard of
And if I may
GNCB,
jump
haven't
in-
you?
What you
If
said?
I,
You've
if
heard
I
of
may just-
GNCB and of Guy Bank.
Yeah, I've heard of those
They
institutions.
were banking institutions created under the Barnum regime specifically to encourage new businesses, encourage small businesses, provide loans for small businesses. It didn't work. Subsidization doesn't work. You have to rely on market
You
forces.
know why a lot of them
Guyanese are, let me finish.
the
Paul.
cooperative bank.
Paul,
You know
let me
why it
finish,
did not
please.
work? Because the middle class went and took loans from those banks. It never gave the small man, as you used to call them, to make them a real man. They never gave the small people the loans. They gave it only to the middle class, politically connected people who went on vacations, buy houses, buy cars. My brother, that is the data. That is a fact that happened under the Barnum regime.
So
That's why the cooperative bank ended up being a disaster.
what you
But
need,
what I'm saying is that unless we find a pathway for the Guyanese at home to go into business and have business opportunities, not to depend totally on the government all the time, and to depend on, they have to find some way of helping these folks to have self-sustaining livelihoods, and they need to invest in them, and they need to give them opportunities. Now, the problem of bankruptcy and failures is not a problem, I think. In capitalism, for every 1,000 failures, you have 2 or 3 people succeed. But that has kept capitalism going. People learn from bankruptcy. They learn from mistakes. So I am saying that in as much as I'm very happy and I applaud that we're having a lot of investors coming to Guyana, and I said that one of the unintended consequences of the elections in Guyana is we're going to have a geopolitical windfall. That everybody now knows about Guyana. Oil is there. There are opportunities. As you rightly said, Timothy, a lot of business people are going. The ambassador just said 500 Fortune businesses are calling her every day. They want to invest in Guyana. So be it. But I am saying at the same time, we have to equally spend time to focus on how to keep those Guyanese at home. Because you yourself agreed that the poor people are the ones that are leaving also, that come to New York and so forth. These are the people who leave.
Paul, if I may, Tim indicated and seemed to have some aversion to academic work. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tim.
yes,
And
let me
he
correct
wants-
you and say you're wrong immediately. If you can say what I said that made that
Okay.
suggestion, I will
Okay,
immediately apologize.
Can you restate?
Please
Because
don't,
you,
this
you
is
wanted,
the second time you've done it. Please don't
You
attribute
wanted-
something to me unless you're going to make a quote. Because
Okay.
you're inaccurate both times.
you wanted practical terms, right? Okay. So the reason I said that, because I'm going right back.
To make that point, because we have to go on a break at 8:15.
All right, quickly. Let me address the elephant in the room, Tim. The elephant in the room. The tensions between Guyanese living in Guyana and those living in the diaspora. And then we're going to go back to the academics. University of Sussex migration expert Ronald Skeldon said that those who left are viewed as leaving to go and live the easy life, and they're not generally welcome when they return home. Now, do you think that that's a practical and a challenge that exists for Guyanese in the diaspora and the local Guyanese, that there are tensions, as the academic has said?
We're going to give Tim an opportunity to, Tim an opportunity to think about it. I think Devin wants to go on a break.
Globespan 24/7 continues. Cannot travel due to COVID? Then treat yourself or your loved one with a gift. Purchase it online, then let Travelspan Shop and Ship take care of the rest. Travelspan is now offering a shop and ship program to Guyana and Trinidad. Cheap rates plus tracking and multiple offices in Georgetown, West Coast Demerara, and Berbice to take care of your package. Treat yourself and ship your Christmas gifts early this year. In Guyana, 227-1701, and in New York, call 347-238-2201. That's 227-1701. And in New York, 347-238-2201. Let Travelspan and Globespan take care of your online shopping and shipping.
Okay, so we are back on Globespan and we're having this discussion on diaspora opportunities and remigration. And we have our two guests here, Timothy and Dwayne. And what we'd like to know is whether or not there are opportunities for Guyanese abroad in Guyana, and whether we believe that Guyanese abroad are interested in remigrating, and if they are interested in remigrating, whether that would be facilitated by the powers that be in Guyana. So before we left, Wayne was raising an issue that he would like Timothy to reflect on. Timothy, can you respond to what he was asking?
Sure. During the break, I asked Wayne two questions, and let me first of all acknowledge that his answers were direct, and I am going to tell you what his answers were, because I don't think that his question therefore applies in Guyana. He quoted an academic from University of Sussex to say that people in the diaspora are not well treated when they return home. But during the break, I asked him if that person was Guyanese, and he said no. And then Wayne volunteered that that person, in fact, wasn't speaking specifically about Guyana. So I want to acknowledge, first of all, his forthrightness and thank him for that. But I want to talk about the Guyana situation. Any foreign Guyanese knows that when they come back to Guyana, they get the royal treatment. Their family love them. Oh, boys, he come back from foreign. He gets all the nice cooking, all the girls like him. He gets taken out, he gets the best alcohol, he gets the royal treatment. Guyanese love coming back to Guyana. No matter how hard they've worked, they may have 2 or 3 jobs and be utterly humble abroad. They may be a security guard or whatever. We love our foreign family. So
I wish I
don't think,
Tim, I wish I was.
Paul, please let me finish. Paul, you do not let me finish a statement. So even at the grassroots level, we do not have that view of the Guyanese in the diaspora. And anyone who has spoken at a higher view, a higher level, among the academia, among the professionals, will tell you Guyanese in the diaspora are some of the most patriotic people that keep an eye on Guyana, quarrel about Guyana politics, Guyana economics, are concerned about Guyana issues. The people watching this program are from Toronto and New York and London, and they're sitting down here quarreling with us about things in Guyana because they are absolutely patriotic. Where they navel Stringberry is where they want to be. And the tension you're talking about doesn't exist in a real sense. Where the tension exists is how Guyana has changed in the last 25 years that a lot of people don't understand. Because a lot of the people who migrated in the hard days of the 80s and the 90s. And Guyana has evolved, not because of good leadership, but by necessity. So our middle class has grown. There are private schools, there are more businesses, there are more people who are driving, who own their own properties, who are living in houses rather than renting. And a lot of the folk in the diaspora who left and who have a memory of lining up for gas, lining up for oil, lining up for toilet paper, they have a skewed memory of what Guyana is. And they have carried and they have harbored, I'm sorry to say that it's true, a lot of them have harbored the polarized, racist views that have really gotten better in Guyana, although a lot of them have surfaced in the last 5 months. Guyana has evolved as a society, and so many people in the diaspora who live abroad for many years don't recognize it. They don't recognize Guyana when they come back. But that tension you're talking about, I'm sorry. I don't think it exists. We know how Guyanese love Guyana. And you know why? Because of the remittances they send back. The fact that they come back for Christmas. The fact that they never forget where they came from.
Tim,
Their children might not be concerned. But no, Guyanese are Guyanese, no matter where you go.
You did answer the question in thoroughly. You were talking about how much Guyanese love Guyana. That was never part of the discussion, how much we love Guyana. That's not important. What we're talking about, what you refer to about Guyanese coming home and having a good time, how long do they stay when they come home and have a good time? They return for vacation. A week, 2 weeks, they have a great time. They love because they bring buddy back, everybody in the family, get the party. Now, look at those who return and get a job at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Business in a high position because he or she is an engineer. There are those in Guyana who will say there are other people who are fitted for that. It's called displacement. So you need to consider that aspect of things when you're looking at the data, and not just the Guyanese who return home and have a good time for vacation during holidays like Christmas, Easter, with the whole combination there. So that's a different answer when we look at where the tensions can arise. And I don't know if you have information on that. Please share if you do.
Great. And that's a very good point. And we can give you some specific examples. Every electoral cycle where there's a change in government, there is an ethnic cleansing of the public service. And I've already pointed out the government is the largest employer. And it was no different in 2015. The number of people, ex-army, who suddenly turned up and were appointed to high positions through and all and sundry in every single government agency, in all the government corporations. You're quite right. They all came in and they displaced the people who had been working there before them who didn't look like them. And now we're seeing in the cycle in 2020, another displacement happening, another cleansing. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but the government employment area is not an area of profit making, of productivity. I like small government. I don't want to see all of those people working in government. I would prefer the government to shrink and the more employment found at first in the foreign investment that is coming in, but then more and more I would like to see it shifting to self-sustaining agriculture, self-sustaining mining and timber, self-sustaining construction, different industries that we can develop as we develop our infrastructure. But I would like to see the government shrink.
Are you therefore withdrawing your answer that there was no tension, or are you modifying it? Which one?
I don't see that pertains to the relationship between Guyana and the diaspora. I don't see that a specific policy by two governments of putting in family and friends into high positions as the largest employer, in some places even creating a job, creating a designation for some friend so that he could get a free dollar. I don't see that that speaks to a tension with the diaspora. That's a different conversation altogether. That's political corruption.
Well, then we can't solve a problem if it doesn't exist, or if we don't acknowledge that it exists. So we're on different sides of the spectrum. You see it from one position, and the literature, and if you Google it, just Google Guyanese discontent or Guyanese diaspora tensions, and you'll see several articles written by.
Why don't you give me some examples that are specific to Guyana?
Pardon me?
Once again, you're there in the hypothetical realm. Can you give me a specific example of someone who is aggrieved?
It's not hypothetical. What I'll ask you to do, you go to YouTube and type in my name, Wayne Forde, and type in.
You're aggrieved.
Type in. Hold on. Let me finish. You asked me for type in diaspora policy. Go ahead. Type in diaspora policy. I don't have that information in front of me now. Go type that in when you get a chance, and that will answer your question. I'll give you my number if you want to
talk. The society is so small that it's all visible. It's in front of your face. You see it happening. And that's why sitting here in Guyana, I can tell you what I've seen. Because as a corporate lawyer, I do interact with the investors. I do interact with the local businesses. And to answer Paul, a lot of Guyanese are developing local businesses. They're doing wood products. They're doing value-added products on wood. They're making shingles. They're making parquet flooring. They're making ordinary flooring. And they're making money doing it. Yeah. A lot of them are getting into jewelry. A lot of them are getting into agriculture and export of products, exporting to the islands. There's a thriving coconut water business that is coming out of Essequibo. From the Pomeroon, people are exporting provisions to Trinidad. So there are things that are happening from Guyanese in Guyana.
Good. That is good.
But that is a
We have 5 minutes
market-driven
more,
thing. We
gentlemen,
can't subsidize.
5 minutes more. And I would, I personally believe that there shouldn't be this dependence all the time on the government, the government, the government. I think we should encourage the government to facilitate Guyanese abroad to go into business rather than anything else. Because if they go into business, I don't think you'll have the kind of problem that this person came and take away that person's job and this and that and the other. I think that usually in the private sector, people have less tension on these things. But we have about 3 minutes more, and the subject we were discussing in the way we were, different aspects of it, because it's not an easy subject, but to specify. Are there opportunities for the diaspora in Guyana with the coming to political office of a new government? And are they going to facilitate, as they have put out the brochure, the remigration of people? Are they very interested in that? So I'd like to have a last minute thought on how you view the opportunities for the diaspora in Guyana in this period that we are in right now, and that we will be in for the next 3, 4, or 5 years. Tim, let me start with you because you're on the ground.
I would like to say that for this kind of conversation, if you are going to draw conclusions, you have to have a solid understanding of what is happening on the ground in Guyana, how the economy is working, what the needs of the economy are, and what the failings in the economy are. You have to have a firm idea about our electricity fluctuation, the fact that the water isn't clean coming out of the pipes, the fact that if you go bust, there is no safety net, no welfare, the fact that the banks are very conservative in their loans and in what they consider as equity before they lend you money, the difficulty in even starting a company or registering a business, getting registered with the tax man, opening a bank account. We mustn't mislead the people in the diaspora who may want to come back. We mustn't paint a nice rosy picture for them and deceive them. Crime is high, things are hard. There is a way that we are going to get out of this, but the way is not going to happen immediately, and it certainly isn't going to happen by painting some rosy picture and misleading people. The way that we're going to get out of this is by foreign investment, which will create jobs, and as a gradual process, as jobs are created, crime will reduce. And over time, our institutions will improve, our infrastructure will improve, the same electricity, the same roads, the same water, the same gas, the garbage collection, all of those things that are so fundamental that you take for granted where you are. I have water tanks over my head. I have backup electricity. I have to pay people to come and collect garbage. I have video cameras outside of my doors to deal with crime and dogs, things that you don't even think about. You cannot forget that and think you're just going to land here and it's all hunky-dory. And it is wrong to try to mislead people, to think that it's going to be easy. I welcome anybody to come back, but come back with a good plan, and do not come back expecting that you're going to get handouts and help from this magic government. It's not going to happen.
Thank you. That's a good reflection. Wayne, what would you like to say in the last 2 minutes that we have?
Yeah, and Tim is right about that. The two things that Guyanese living abroad are concerned about in terms of returning to Guyana, one is personal security, and the second is health care. Those are the two important factors. And if they're not addressed in the policy areas, then that's a problem. You will not attract folks. In addition to that, I just wanted to cover a part of the return problems that existed with a more concrete example for Tim. And this has happened in Jamaica. And we've got to make the assumption, that Guyana is not so unique, or is not unique, that these things will not happen in Guyana if they have happened in Jamaica, in China, in Turkey, and in other countries around the world. And what I'm talking about is those tensions that exist. And it has happened with the Jamaican diaspora also. It has happened in 1990 when China drew blood by attracting folks home. They were called the sea turtles, those who came back. and those who stayed were called land turtles.
We got
so that was a problem.
Before we have to move on. I'd like to thank our guests. It's a pity that Peter, who holds an important position in Go Invest, had to leave, because it would have been good to get his reaction to some of the comments. I think the discussion was a discussion that touched the multifaceted aspects of this problem. There's a number of hurdles that has been very clearly identified by Tim on the ground that we have to overcome. And Wayne is an old horse at beating the drum of the diaspora. And I hope at some point that we will be able to have an opportunity to tap the resources of the diaspora beyond remittances, and that they will be able to connect with the Guyanese at home so that they could make investments in different ways, so that we could have a real transformation of Guyana, where Guyanese don't depend totally on the big, large corporations, but they themselves are generating jobs, taking initiatives, and making things move forward. So I look forward to, at some other point, that we could continue to have a discussion on this, because this is not going to end today or tomorrow. The diaspora will be there for a while. Guyana will be there for a long while. So let's hope the next time we meet to discuss this particular subject, we may have some more concrete examples of what's happening abroad, what's happening at home, and how this diaspora Guyanese mesh is going to happen and the bridges would be built. So until next time, for Globespan, I'd like to thank our guests, thank to those who have been listening, and we look forward to the next program that we will have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.